Welcome to this episode of the 94twenty podcast, where we talk about the music that we love and the industry that we tolerate.
It takes a special kind of person to love me. Maybe it's just because I grew up country. This ain't my first rodeo, I know I'm stubborn. You can drive my truck, you can drive me crazy, but you can't drive my boat. Can't drive my boat. Can't drive my boat. Can't drive my boat. And don't be trying to convince me, it's the pretty ones that don't listen. We turn up when we're fishing, urban cowboy on a mission. Yeah, yeah. And my boat has stipulations. Yeah, yeah. You can't drive my boat. It takes a special kind of person to love me. Maybe it's just because I grew up country. This ain't my first rodeo, I know I'm stubborn. You can drive my truck, you can drive me crazy, but you can't drive my boat. Can't drive my boat. You can't whip it to the left, you can't whip it to the right, but you can do your thing, and you can do it all night. Can't drive my boat, 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 boat. You already rock my boat. Yeah. Are you crazy like Tammy Wynette? Spark up that Willie Nelson. Bring your friends in low places. The cowboy is on a mission, and my love has one stipulation. You can't drive my boat. It takes a special kind of person to love me. Maybe it's just because I grew up country. This ain't my first rodeo, I know I'm stubborn. You can drive my truck, you can drive me crazy, but you can't drive my boat. Can't drive my boat. You can't drive my boat. Can't drive my boat. You can't whip it to the left, you can't whip it to the right, but you can do your thing, and you can do it all night. Can't drive my boat. You already rock my boat. It takes a special kind of person to love me. Maybe it's just because I grew up country. This ain't my first rodeo, I know I'm stubborn. You can drive my truck, you can drive me crazy, but you can't drive my boat.
Hey everyone, that was Lamont Coleman's latest single, My Boat. Welcome to the I was going to say, welcome to the 94twenty podcast.
There you go.
How are you guys doing today?
Actually, I'm miserable, but that's okay.
Well,
It's a lousy, rainy, muggy day up in New York, and I'm just miserable. And I started off the day fighting with everybody, so and it just went downhill from there, and it's one big misery.
Well,
anyway, I think that song, My Boat. I think Lamont used to be. He was with his duo. I remember about a few years back called Broken Hallelujah, and they, he did a few things with Band Twango. They never did campaign, I don't think, but he was down in Nashville. Now he's up here in New York. He's a really interesting dude.
And honestly, believe it or not, he's very down to earth. When I was able to meet him and Courtney when they were still Broken Hallelujah, they were so much fun to hang out with when we were able to have some opportunities for them. So, I don't know. I enjoyed that single.
I met him. It's funny. I met him, years back, with Broken Hallelujah. Hadn't seen him in a while, but he's a really striking dude. Long dreads, wears like cowboy hats and leather vests, and he's tall. It's like a few years later, I'm on the subway here in New York, and I'm sitting in the car with my baseball cap looking like some regular schmo, and I see this guy walk on, striking. I'm going, is that Lamont? And he cowboy boots, big wide brim hat, dreads down to his, his waist, like all these kind of sunglasses and sparkle sunglasses. So I go up to him and go, oh, he looked real intimidating too when you first look at him too, because he's so big and striking. He's like 7 foot tall with the boots on. Yeah, I go up to go, Lamont? He goes, yeah, man. I go, it's Carl from Band Twango. He goes, really? And then he just lights up and starts going, how you doing, man? What are you doing? And all of a sudden he starts going into this whole animated thing. He's really who he is, man.
Is he pursuing the music thing in New York City?
I think he's all over the place. I know that we did a thing with Leah Turner. We did she's like an act. We did a campaign with about a year ago, and he produced one of her singles. So he produces all over the place. He does like,
too. Yeah, cool.
He produces, he writes. He's like just one of those Renaissance dudes.
Everlastingly at it. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And I even remember back a couple of years ago when I was able to meet them, he was still, even with Broken Hallelujah, he still had so many side projects of producing things that like he was always busy, like always doing something. So
if you listen, I recommend you people go follow him on Instagram and stuff because he always has all these positive things to say, and he's like, he's a real trip. I like him a lot.
Very cool.
So what do you want to talk about today? About me being miserable, or you want to just pick on Greg?
No, we do not want to. I'd rather you pick
I'm
on
a little annoyed too today because we didn't do it last time, so I got to get it out because we have to do it every show. Pokey Lafarge. We must say,
there you go.
We got to bring up Pokey Lafarge in every episode.
Pokey, if you're out there.
Pokey, answer my Instagram messages. I have been wanting to get you on the podcast.
So today, this episode, we're going to talk about, I guess we'll talk about our question of the week, right?
Well, I think our question of the week this week is something that is just interesting because there's so many different stories that can be told from it.
What are we talking about?
We're talking about the question of the week.
I'm the worst at this.
Never fails.
No,
to just,
never fails.
It's gold. It's comedy gold.
But the question was,
what is your first memory of music? Which I thought it's always interesting because everyone's answer is going to be different to this. It's not going to be the same because it's so personal. But we have 4 really good answers that I'm excited to get to. But before we get to that, I would love to know what both Carl and Greg's first memory of music is.
I thought about it. I don't even know. I have no idea.
Really?
I could make something up. Like, my father humming Beethoven to my mother's stomach when I was in the womb. I don't know.
Yeah, right. I actually have been thinking, we come up with these questions, a week before. And
Mm-hmm.
I actually have just been put in such a great mood over this silly question because I basically, I don't remember either. I don't know what my first memory of hearing a particular song or I don't know what my first memory might be, but what it did was it sent me down the rabbit hole of, you guys know how much I love nostalgia. And so
Right.
it sent me down this kind of mid-century rabbit hole where I actually thought of something that I hadn't thought of in years. And I kind of arrived at the idea that it was probably the pivotal, most inspiring thing for me growing up as far as music is concerned. And it's kind of a weird story, but I'll try to explain it as quickly as possible. So most people that listen to this podcast, they probably have no concept of what it was like to consume music or be a music lover in the 60s, in the mid 60s. And
why, you think we have a young audience?
I think, everybody's younger than me, right? So
how old are you? You were 84 last week, right?
I'm 60 years old. So people in the mid 60s, they had a love affair with music that was kind of all over the map. And one of the things that happened in every town, in every city in America was that, there was this big burgeoning industry of white tablecloth, kind of fancy restaurants that served middle-class America. You would dress up a little bit more than normal and you'd go out on a Friday or Saturday night and you'd go to one of these restaurants. These restaurants were very kind of exotic and swanky. And we had one in little town of New Albany, Indiana, across the river from where I grew up. And it was in a motel. The motel was called the Robert E. Lee Inn. And so one thing that most of these restaurants, these swankier restaurants, had in common was, and this is going to sound like alien stuff to most people that I think that listen to podcasts.
I fell
Organists.
I fell asleep for a second. What were we talking
Organists. Do you remember going to a restaurant, a fancier restaurant in the mid 60s, and
No.
they had
What are you talking about, man?
they had
Where did you grow
entertainers.
up?
They had entertainers ensconced in these restaurants, and they played these massive Hammond and Wurlitzer organs, and they were just at the forefront of kind of this MIDI polyphonic thing.
I went to no restaurant in my youth that had an organ ever.
Well,
So, did you?
Maybe it's a regional thing because I did not. I did go to restaurants that did have entertainment, but like not organists and big to do.
So you were at a skating rink?
We had Robert E. Lee in, and we had a local celebrity that played the organ there 4 nights a week. His name was Earl Gregory, and he was a showman extraordinaire. And I can remember standing in these, in this booth, this.
This is your first memory of music? Earl Gregory organ at the restaurant?
Earl Gregory organ at the restaurant, and his repertoire, I can tell you, it was just extraordinary. Songs like Alley Cat and Bill Bailey and
all horrible songs.
Wolverton Mountain, Claude King.
I don't even know what that is.
The great Claude King song, Wolverton Mountain.
I don't know what that is.
What was interesting about these organists was that Hammond was making an organ that had bass pedals, and they also were kind of like they were putting drum sounds and beats. This is all pre-digital, but they were putting drum sounds and beats in these organs.
Those cheesy little
Yep. They ended up selling these organs into a lot of American homes. I mean, organ was a thing. So that's my memory. The idea that I would, my family and others would be, cavorting, and I would be keyed on Earl Gregory.
So, ladies and gentlemen, that's Greg's memory. We'll probably let's hear somebody else's. Let's do one of the questions we asked a bunch of people.
Wait a minute, 2 more things. So, if you'd like to hear this organ sound that permeated my childhood.
Greg's selling them in the back of his car. He has Earl Gregory's cassettes.
There is a wonderful.
That's what he found when he was cleaning out his garage.
There is a wonderful compilation out there. I think it's part of the Luxurious series, but it's called Organs in Orbit. Organs in Orbit. So I would go to Spotify and I would listen to Organs in Orbit. And you can understand my musical upbringing better.
Anyway, so one of the questions we asked a few people is, what's my first music memory? The first one I'll play is from Briana Calhoun. As a matter of fact, she happens to be doing a last week of her campaign up on Bantango.
I bet she doesn't know who Earl Gregory is.
I don't think anyone knows Earl Gregory. I don't even think Earl Gregory's parents know who he is. Anyway, so let's see what Briana has to say.
So my first memories of music was definitely of my mom singing to me when I was a really little girl. She would make up songs and basically sing me to sleep on her guitar. And she's a singer-songwriter as well, so I get it naturally. But my own first music memory was probably of me singing in church. We were having a tent revival in the middle of the summer in rural Texas, and I remember getting up on that stage, and I sang His Eyes on the Sparrow for everybody. I think I was about 6 years old, and even though I was really nervous, I loved it at the same time, and I've been doing it ever since.
There you go.
See, that's like a normal music memory.
And no organ, Greg, so I don't know.
No organ.
Earl also, his claim to fame, other than
so we're going to call this the Earl Gregory episode?
Other than playing at the Robert E. Lee Inn, he also he was much in demand across the region. He also
was the town lawyer, and
he was in demand as the organist for the horse shows. So he played all across the country as the horses promenade. And
what horses?
Horse shows.
Well, Greg, you're from Kentucky, right?
Right.
So what, Kentucky Derby kind of shows?
No, these
I
are more
thought that was more trumpets, though. They used to play trumpets for that stuff.
They still do play trumpets.
You know, if you
All
ever
right.
heard Earl play Hammond, I mean, he could pull the stop
big,
for the horns.
Did they have Leslie's?
Have trumpet.
Big Leslie?
Absolutely, man. Absolutely.
So you're saying these restaurants had big Hammond organs and Leslie speak at a Leslie at these restaurants?
Hundreds across the country. I'm going to do more research, and we're going to replace Pokey Lafarge with Earl Gregory for the next 5
I think so. We're building a whole group here. All right, let's want to go to another person. So we have this band. Was it Hudson Valley?
Hudson Valley, yeah. They're originally out of New York, so obviously the name kind of rings true there.
It's Richie Owens and Sarah Owens. Are they related? Are they sister, brother, married? What?
They're married, I believe.
So let's hear from Sarah first, okay?
Hey, this is Sarah from the band Hudson Valley, and my earliest music memory is probably watching the 1994 CMA Awards. And I remember it so vividly because it was the first time I had actually ever seen Martina McBride and Faith Hill sing on TV. And I was just thinking, I want to do that when I grow up.
1994. So she's young, this girl, right?
Yeah, I mean, most of the people that we're asking to do this are young.
That's the greatest thing about music is that, you know, when we stop and think about it, you know, we've kind of, I have been listening to music for 50 years. So, you know, you get every decade, and I can certainly understand how somebody's pivotal memory is from the 90s or from the 80s or from,
I just thought of a memory. And it's funny, and I don't know if it's my first memory, but I must have been under 10, okay? And we used to have this little like suitcase record player, like Victrola, sure. A little record, and the speaker came out of the box, and a little record. And I remember I took one of my mom's singles, and it was I remember this too. It was Elvis Presley, "It's Now or Never." And I remember playing that. It's now or never. Dun, 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 dun. I just played in my room. Yeah. And that was one of my, I remember that now. It's bizarre.
I think I remember records, but it certainly wasn't as magical as the live performance of Earl Gregory.
I never see that. I was sheltered. I lived in Long Island, and grew up. My parents weren't like very musical. They had like 4 records, like Well,
let me ask you a question. So we're talking. My memory is from the mid-century, mid-60s, and it's kind. I believe
me too.
I believe it was kind of a cultural thing. These organists, but that's beside the point. So let me ask you this. So in where you grew up in that region, did men build little bars in the basement? And
yeah, we had a bar. We had a bar. We had our own bar.
Okay, so
my parents even had their own bar in the first house that we owned, and every single family member had their own bar.
And was there a stereo or record player in proximity to the bar?
I said, I'll give you one even better. There was a jukebox in my grandmother's basement that we would all go down to. And every single time the family was over, all of the kids would go down there and we would play songs off of it. And our parents loved it because they didn't have to entertain us.
They would go to the Woolworths or whatever, and they would stock it. Stock it with singles.
Had the she called it the stereo. I remember that for years. The stereo. Turn down the stereo down there.
Stereo. I like
the
that.
Stereo.
I love that. Yeah, I mean, I guess one of my early memories of an actual recording or a record is I remember that my uncle used to come down to
it's a duet between Pokey Lafarge and Earl Gregory.
Earl Gregory. My father used to hold court in the downstairs bar. They had the bar lights and all that stuff, and my uncle would come over, and I remember distinctly my uncle having a few too many Fall City beers and saying, "Hey, I bought this new record," and he put it on. And I believe it was the B-side. I have a friend named Bob Irwin that's an absolute expert at all of this, and maybe someday he can confirm. But it's a song called "Little Red Riding Hood."
And the Seven of the Pharaohs.
Exactly. But
I know the organ. I have a guy who my next door neighbor's
played the
nephew
Farfisa on
said
it.
he was the organ player for that band.
That's incredible.
Joey Rattoli Jr.
Email him and find out if it was the B-side.
Anyway, let's hear what Sarah's husband Richie had to say, also from Hudson Valley.
Hey, this is Richie Owens from the band Hudson Valley. My first memory with music would definitely be I'd grown up listening to my father sing, and my mother tried to harmonize with him. He released a song in 1958 when he was 15 years old, a doo-wop song. But like I said, they would always have people over the house and bust out the karaoke machine. It definitely got me influenced, got me started playing the drums, and it's cool too because my father and I both have songs on Spotify today, which is pretty awesome.
No, that's awesome.
Do you want to know what his father's band's name is? It's Dickie Bell and the Bing Bongs, and the single is Ding-a-ling Ding Dong.
Is it a hit?
I don't know, but it's a doo-wop song, and it's got over 3,000 streams on Spotify.
Okay.
So
good for him.
Yeah.
What's your? Do you have a memory, Nicole?
I do.
What's your name? Carl. Carl is not on his game today. The girl.
The girl.
That's why he's the girl. She's the girl. I'm the other guy. Go ahead.
Well, it's interesting because I kind of took the perspective of Greg of like over the last couple of days trying to like figure out what that actual memory could be. But like the way that I took it is it's the definitive memory of like the first time I remember either hearing music or having music surrounded that has kept with me throughout the years. And I was 5 and we were in our old house on Oakfield in Belmore. And we had a detached garage from the house. And my dad would always do like his yard work or whatnot on Saturdays and Sundays. And it was the day that it started as a tradition for us. But he opened up the garage and me and my twin sister and my younger sister all went in and he put on the stereo.
Sister?
I do. I have a twin sister. She lives in Bel Air, Maryland.
Do you sound alike?
We sound alike. We are complete opposites. She is very like analytical and straightforward.
Identical?
I'm more
Identical?
like creative brain. No, I think we're fraternal.
Okay.
My mom never got the test done. We looked a lot alike when we were younger. We look alike now, but not so much where you're like, oh, you're definitely twins. However, our daughters, Kenzie was born June of 2018. Her daughter was born June of 2019. They were born a year and 4 days apart, and her due date was actually my daughter's birthday.
So there's no chance.
Very weird.
You sound alike, but there's really no chance that you could like send her in to cover for you on a podcast. And
God, no.
Okay, because some kind of bewitched type thing. Yeah, we don't want that.
No, and we could never do that in school because she was always so much smarter. So like if I were to go into the class, the teacher would automatically know because I just didn't like to do homework. I was that child.
Did you dress the same?
We did. My mom actually dressed all 3 of her daughters the same. It got to a point where I think we were 10 and we were like, Mom, you have to stop.
Yep. There's going to be an insurrection here. Yeah.
Yeah. But now we dress our daughters the same. We go out and we buy them the same clothes and they don't even live near each other.
The sins of the mother.
Oh, yeah. So my first memory is my dad opening up the garage to do yard work. He turned on the stereo and John Mellencamp's Wild Night came on. And we all just started dancing and like playing air guitar with the brooms and whatnot that were in there. And it just so happened to be like, it started a tradition for us where every Sunday we would all go out and we would do our own little like air guitar band with whatever was on the radio. And that's kind of how we all kind of spent time together and enjoyed it.
You just triggered another bizarre memory I have. I forgot about this. I didn't forget, but I forgot to... When my grandmother, I used to live in Long Island, and my grandmother lived in Queens in South Ozone Park. So every like Saturday or Sunday, we would go pick up my grandmother in Queens and bring her out to spend the weekend in the island because we lived in Long Island. So this one day, we pick up my grandmother one Sunday, pick her up on the way home to my house. We had this car accident. These guys just went through a stop sign and we hit them like kind of right into their side. But my grandmother went through the window. That was before seatbelts were mandatory. I was on the floor, glass all over the place. I thought she was going to die because all the blood because she got cut. So I'm in the emergency room with South Nassau Hospital in Oceanside, worrying about my grandmother and the TV's on. And this is a true story. And it was the night that the Beatles played the Ed Sullivan Show. So I saw the Beatles Ed Sullivan Show in the emergency room, worrying about my grandmother. That was my first of seeing the Beatles. That everyone talks about the Beatles and Ed Sullivan. That's how I saw them.
Wow.
And I'm one of those guys. You hear it almost sounds like a cliche. Like Billy Joel, these guys say when they heard the Beatles, that's when it'll opened up for them and stuff. I agree too. I go, there was something about that. There was some weird kind of thing going on with those guys. Maybe because Kennedy just got shot and it was a weird whole, I was only like 7, but still, it It was very interesting, So
Seminal, yeah.
I told you my Ringo story, right?
No.
I was at a Grammy party years ago.
I have a Ringo story too.
I was at a Grammy party a few years ago. That's when I had it in New York. I was at some club, downtown. I forget where. After the Grammys, when they had it in Radio City one year. So we're sitting there, and like a Beatle walks in. This is like maybe in the 90s, but still, it's one of the Beatles, even though it's only Ringo. So he comes in, he sits down and kind of holds court, right? So me, I was still drinking back then. And all of a sudden, this line, it's almost like you're going to see the Pope. A line just, emerges where everyone wants to go say hello to Ringo. So he sits down at his table and there's a line. So I get online. I'm with this guy from EMI at the time. So he was behind me. So when I get to Ringo, I get idiot. I go, "Hey, Ringo, big fan. I was wondering, do you want to be in my band? Since you're a good drummer, I can use a drummer for my band." And looks at me, I goes, "No." like basically like F you, like schmuck. So I walk away, and then my friend talks, and then he comes up and goes, he was a lot more fun when he was drinking. So that's my Ringo story. Anyway.
I was meeting with some guys in New York. I don't remember when this was, probably in the late 90s. And I don't even remember what hotel it was, but we were sitting in this hotel, and it was kind of a private hotel, and it was very posh, and we're sitting there, and there were like three of us, and we were pretty intense in our discussion of some business stuff.
Is that the time you were discussing the publishing deal with Earl Gregory?
No, well, stop bringing him up, because I have a lot more to say about Earl Gregory, and I don't want this episode to be like taken over by Earl Gregory.
It already has.
So we're kind of engaged in this.
Ringo's going to contact Earl Gregory.
We're kind of engaged in this intense conversation, and in the path between our table and the bar, Ringo just walks through the room, and he had like a tracksuit on, and he was kind of like, seemed like he was in a decent enough mood, but he just walked through the room, and everybody stopped their conversations, and it was just very bizarre because, and he looked over at us and he said, "Gentlemen," and then that's all he said, and he just kept walking, and we could never reach the intensity of our business conversation after that, because everybody was kind of in awe. That's like Ringo Starr just walked through the bar. It's so bizarre.
Well, because he, again, not to make this a fan cat, whatever, but
fan cast.
Yeah. But yeah, but Ringo is, to me, what makes the Beatles, because the Beatles are more than just musical guys. They're like part of our youth, our culture, our they're like these iconic things that, they almost transcend just people. Like, to be Paul McCartney must be bizarre, because wherever he goes, it's a big deal for anyone he sees, because like, oh my God, like he might just walk past, down the street, like he walks to the store, but then that's Paul McCartney. Oh my God. And he wants to take a picture. It must be tiring to be him. Anywhere you go, it's like a big,
I was a big fan of like prog rock and things in the 70s. So, all the guys, all the drummers.
Isn't that when like Earl Gregory went progressive back in, wasn't he in Emerson, Lake and Gregory?
Okay. So 1 second. So, not to belabor the point, but do we have the ability to post images at 94twenty.com?
Sure, we can do anything you want.
Because I did actually go out and I did find one digital image of Earl Gregory at the Hammond, and I'd like to post it at 94twenty.com so that people can understand the X factor this man had.
I can even put it in the swipe content when we post too. So there can be the 9420 things, and then you swipe to see Earl Gregory.
He actually made a number of records, and he would sell them at the Robert E. Lee. And I actually have one record, but it's really not playable at this point.
Is he still alive, you think?
No, I think he's gone on to his reward. But I like to try to find the album, because the cover art is amazing. It's full color. the picture that I have to post.
It's full color. What are we like in the 60s? Hey man, you should get this record. You know why? The cover's in color.
Oh man, I mean, they made these records. A lot of these guys made these records, in local studios, and they had their own little cottage.
It's got a hole in the middle and everything.
And when you stop and think about it, I mean, the business hasn't changed that much. I mean, you can walk into an Applebee's in a lot of places and buy the CD of the guy that's banging on the Ovation guitar.
Yeah, I never liked people playing Ovations. We got one last question answered. Let's get to it. Someone we know by the name of Maude. So let's play Maude's answer and see what she's got to say. How's that sound?
Sounds good.
My first music memory is being in the kitchen of my parents' first little Cape Cod house. Mom kept the radio on top of the refrigerator, the kind of refrigerator with the flying V-looking door handle. And I remember hearing Red Roses for a Blue Lady, which was very confusing at the time because I was at that literal age where I absolutely thought someone knew a lady who was blue and wanted to get her some red roses.
Okay. I don't even know who did that song. You know what that song she's talking about?
Yeah, I think about 1,000 people cut that song. I think
I heard a Blue Velvet.
Wayne Newton had a big hit with it.
Yeah, we name
Dean Martin also had it.
Are you saying we have a young crowd? And look at the people we're naming: Dean Martin, Wayne Newton,
Earl Gregory.
How about Guy Lombardo?
Hey.
To give an update on Earl Gregory, unfortunately, he did pass away on November 10th, 2018.
Really?
2018?
Yeah.
How old was he?
Man.
I'll click on the obituary. Hold on. 78.
Wow.
I'm telling you, he was a super nice guy. And really my first touch at 5 or 6 years old, my first experience with somebody with X Factor that was an entertainer, that was a showman, that he would come around to every table on his break and make sure Manhattans were flowing and the Shirley Temples were being consumed.
I think you grew up in some bizarre bubble.
Alternate universe.
Yeah, it really I grew up around the same time, but I had none of those experiences. Maybe because I grew up around New York City.
My upbringing probably wasn't anything like yours, but I think that for people that are listening to this, they probably wouldn't have experienced any of this weirdness, but they probably all loved Mad Men, right? So that's the way I describe to.
I think I grew up more in Mad Men. My father was.
I think we grew up in Mad Men, and so that's what the experience was.
Yeah, my father had cocktails. He left when I was younger, but when I was really younger, he had cocktails every night. They had martini, they had a bar and then a roll around bar with little martini glasses, and they put me in my room. Remember, they locked me in my room because I was too young, and they used to play Red Fox comedy records that were kind of blue. So they'd have guests over, so I'd have him and their kids who I hated shoved in the bedroom so they could listen to these blue dirty joke records, comedy records.
Yeah, which is so odd, but I think that a kid growing up in that time when the kind of social mores were people were playing around literally and figuratively, and
right.
I think people were 10, 15 years out of a major conflict, right?
War, right.
Yeah. So, I think people were starting to enjoy their expendable income, and their people were trying to stretch the limits of this middle class existence. And I think music was a huge part of that. And I think that, as kids growing up in that era, I think we got to see a lot, hear a lot. And
one last thing, my father, who I have very, very few memories of because he left when I was 10. I remember more from my mother telling me he was a dance instructor before he worked, got his real job, in the airlines, whatever. That's how my mother kind of met him. They used to go dancing. My father, that's why that was his big thing. He was a good dancer. He used to know the merengue and all that cha-cha and all that kind of stuff. So a lot of the records that we did have were all these Latin, bossa nova beat things. It's funny, and I'm not that rhythmic at all, so I got none of it. I can't dance for anything, so Girl from Ipanema, right?
Earl did that one really well. We had a good.
On that note.
Yeah. It's the Earl Gregory show now.
All right. Well, Rest in peace. Rest in peace.
Right.
Quite
All
the
right.
showman.
Yes. Well, on that note, everyone, thank you so much for joining us for this episode of the 9420 podcast. For all of the show notes and links to anything that we talked about, you can go to 94twenty.com. That is the numbers 94 and the letters TWENTY.com. Until next week, we'll talk to you guys later.
Bye. Oh, wait. Hold on. Goodbye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
See ya.